All right, why don't we get started? We are in lecture 5, and we started already last time, geography, health, and development, so we're going to continue on that part of the course, and then we'll move on to some of the other human capital topics. Before getting started, one thing, how many of you have not yet bought the Glenister book on running randomized evaluations, but are potentially interested in buying it? A few of you? Okay. Maybe Elisa can raise her hand. Elisa works at SIGA, the center here on campus that I work with. SIGA has a bunch of copies of that book that we got from the publisher of that book, and can basically sell them to you for the one-time price of $19.99, I believe. Something like that. I forget what the price is. But if you're interested, talk to Elisa, and she can sell you a copy of the book. We basically have extra copies that we bought for $20, and we can sell to you guys for $20. Okay? Any other questions before I get started? Okay, one other point. The problem set, I was going to pass it out today, but I've decided to hold off just because we haven't. I want to get through like one more lecture and get through a little more material before passing it out, because you'll be a little bit better sort of prepared to work on the problem set. So I think I'm going to pass it out on Thursday. I'll post it on B courses, and it'll still be due in a week. So I'm just pushing it a couple days out. Yeah, that's right. So I'll pass it out Thursday, and then instead of being due Tuesday, it'll be due next Thursday. And you'll need to use Stata, so those of you who have not yet gotten access to Stata should try to do so. And I think in section this week, you'll all be going through Stata, so hopefully you'll be pretty comfortable with Stata, pretty familiar at least with the basic commands by then. Okay, any questions on that, on the problem set? Okay, one thing I do want to mention, may interest some of you. Oops, oh, my clicker isn't working. Sorry. Huh. Okay. In case you're insanely bored this weekend, I'm speaking at the TEDx Berkeley thing. It's been a lifetime dream of mine as someone named Ted to speak at the TED Talk. The tickets are selling out. I was just contacted by folks, so if you are interested, you should try to get tickets today. They're discounted student tickets, or you can watch it online or something. But we're going to cover a lot of the stuff in the talk in the course, so you can also just wait till lecture 23 or 24 or somewhere there. Yeah, so it's an all-day thing. I'm going to be speaking in the afternoon in the 3 to 5 session. I'm kind of in one of the later talks. So, okay, great. Any other questions? Great, so let's get going. Last time we talked about the curse of the tropics. This is just a recap of what we talked about. There are these very large worldwide differences in per capita income between tropical and non-tropical regions, and that holds globally, that holds within subregions of the world. And since almost all of sub-Saharan Africa is in the tropics, this is a very relevant issue for Africa. And we talked about the Bloom and Sachs 1998 article and the different channels that they proposed for why tropical Africa in particular is so poor. And that's really the motivation behind their piece. They talked about agricultural productivity, disease, and transport costs. We got quite a bit of the way through agricultural productivity last time. We'll continue today, and then we'll discuss disease and transport costs. And then we're going to turn back to health and disease for like a few weeks, because there's a lot of different topics within health that we're going to talk about. So we talked last time about this general pattern that crop yields are low in Africa and the reasons why. And the reasons that Bloom and Sachs focus on, or one of the main reasons, have to do with rainfall variability. So we focused on this in class last time, that many African countries experience drought. That I'm not going to show it again, but last time I showed you the full distribution of rainfall patterns across years in sub-Saharan Africa, and there's just really wide variability in rainfall patterns, but average rainfall is pretty low. So it tends to be dry there. There tend to be drought years, and of course that can have really big consequences for agricultural production. We also, I think we were just ending up last time talking about these two crops, sort of hypothetical crops, although in many real-world situations you see this sort of issue, where one crop, and here that's crop 2, has higher average yield. That's why that dotted red line is a bit higher than the dotted green line, whereas crop 1 tends to have lower average yield. So if we weren't worried about variability of rainfall or variability of crop yields, it might seem like a no-brainer. Hey, for a certain amount of effort, I get a lot more production out of the red crop, crop 2. I should grow the red crop. But what we discussed last time is there may be a pattern between these crops that, in terms of their variability, that makes crop 2 less attractive. So in particular, if when rains are good, the red crop does great, but when rains are bad, with the red crop you do terribly, now all of a sudden the red crop doesn't look as attractive as it did before. Because in the drought years, I get nothing, or almost nothing, and at least with the green crop, I'm kind of doing okay. I have enough to survive. Now, literally where we left off last time was this discussion of which of these would you choose. Now, in the case of many sub-Saharan African settings, the red crop might be corn or maize, especially if you have a good variety, what's called a hybrid variety or a high-yield variety of corn. And crop 2 might be cassava, a root crop, which is not as prone to drought. It tends to do okay even when it's dry. So there is a real-world analog here. And then the question is, are people growing too much cassava because it's a lower variability crop? So let's just pick up where we left off last time. What would be the factors that would make you want to choose crop 2 versus crop 1? So in particular, what would make you choose crop 2, the higher yielding crop? What kind of assurances, what kind of products, what would you need in order to adopt this high yield but risky crop? Yeah. So irrigation could help. Irrigation could help because then if I have a stored body of water and I can irrigate my crops, maybe in these bad years, my production won't be so bad. Maybe it'll insure me a little bit against those bad years. So irrigation, yeah. Some form of storage. If I could save all that great production in the good years and store it for a couple years, then maybe even in a bad year I could still eat my crop from a couple years ago. Yeah. Yeah, there could be insurance, either government or private insurance, that says, okay, every year you pay me a premium, so my average yield is a little bit below that red line because I'm paying a premium every year, but then I get a payout when the rains are bad. So maybe that pushes me back up towards the dashed red line. So storage, insurance, irrigation, what else would be useful? I feel like this thing turned off. Because that battery's gone. Okay, hold on a sec. Okay, there's no more batteries. What is this one? Let me see. I'm fine because we won't have the recording for online. I think you guys can hear me, right? Yeah. We're just not going to have the recording for online, unfortunately. Unless we can get a battery somehow. I don't know if anybody can email ETS. Do they have like an emergency battery service? They probably. Is that amazing? I can make an empty room. Oh, maybe there's like an empty room somewhere in the hallway here that has all these closets or something? Oh, you just want to check? Okay, great. Okay, let's just keep going, and we can't satisfy the whole lecture to the mic. So go ahead. management, the critique people often raise against informal or family arrangements is if we're hit by drought, probably our whole village or our whole area is hit by drought, so we're not going to be able to insure each other's wells. We can insure with people who are say far away and we get different weather. So even though the informal insurance would help somewhat, we want to get a broader kind of pool of people insuring risk. That's what we want in general with insurance. We want a lot of people with very different risk profiles so we can insure each other. Okay. Yeah.
Like access to markets and taking advantage of that.
Yeah. So maybe what you're saying is maybe it's related a bit to storage issue. If I can sell all that excess product in year one, I can store it in bank, I can store it as cash, and then buy grain in year two. So it doesn't even have to be grain storage. It could just be access to markets to turn that grain into cash, which then I can save. So a lot of you guys have been mentioning are various forms of financial intervention, storage, savings, insurance of various kinds. Irrigation is a technological innovation, but it solves a lot of the same problems and allows us to smooth out the rainfall cycle a bit. Because we can basically move water from good times to bad times. So it's almost like storage at different times. Okay. So here are some of the issues that you guys have pretty much raised. All these except for one, because my sort of concern about this variability is going to be a function of how risk averse I am. So the more risk averse I am, the more I really don't like that downside realization of income. The more it hurts when I have very low income, the more likely I am to choose the green crop. If for whatever reason, I don't really care too much about having very low income for some reason, I'll always choose the red crop, and things will sort of even out for me. But if very low income is really bad for me, I'm really risk averse, then I'm going to choose the green crop. And so if we're thinking of poor farmers in rural Africa that don't have much in the way of assets, that don't have much money, we would think they'd actually be fairly risk averse. Because if the crop fails, people run out of food. So there's very severe consequences to having the bad rains with the red crop. For all these reasons, income, the absence of these financial products, the absence of irrigation, force people basically to choose a low value crop just to survive. So that's the idea. All these credit market, financial market effects may lead to suboptimal investment choices or crop choices. Okay. So rainfall matters. Rainfall can have very severe consequences, even in good years. That was the point of the previous slide. Even in good years, you may choose low productivity crops, precisely because it insures you against the bad years. It's not just in bad years where we're going to see the consequences of bad rainfall. It can be much more pervasive than that. What's another issue Bloom's talk about? They talk about soil quality. It turns out a lot of soils in sub-Saharan Africa are quite old, quite weathered. There's a lot of rainfall in some of the rainforest areas. The soils are actually not very fertile. Despite common misperception. Do you find batteries, by the way? Amazing. Okay. Thank you. Great. Too bad for the guy in the other classroom, though. Now their batteries run out. Did you get this from another classroom? Oh, nice. Oh, perfect. Okay. Great. Yes. 4 bars. We're back. Great. So another issue with soil quality being low. There is an exception to the soil quality claim. There are certain parts of sub-Saharan Africa where there's a lot of seismic activity, volcanic activity, and so there's actually a highland region that runs up and down East Africa from Ethiopia down through Kenya, Uganda, parts of Tanzania, Rwanda, even into Zimbabwe, that tends to have pretty good quality soils, volcanic soils. Plus those tend to be pretty high altitude areas that are a bit cooler. So you don't get as much evaporation of water, and soils aren't as dry. So those highland regions tend to be among the most fertile regions of sub-Saharan Africa for farming. And so this is called the Great Rift Valley. Part of the cost, though, being in that region is it's not on the coast. It's a bit isolated in the interior. So these historically productive regions, and historically quite high population density regions, weren't the ones that could as easily trade with outsiders. So that's a bit of the trade-off. So you can see roughly on the map where the Great Rift Valley falls. And you see there's lots of lakes. A lot of these are basically rifts between different plates. They're the result of seismic activity. They're very deep lakes caused by seismic or volcanic activity. That's a very fertile agricultural region. And some of Blumensax's characterization of African agriculture doesn't really hold in that region because they are pretty lush soils. Okay. So the soil quality issue, and I just mentioned this, the combination of relatively low rainfall and being in the tropics with high temperatures leads to dry soils. And we've already talked about how there's very little irrigation in sub-Saharan Africa. So you tend to have dry, relatively unproductive soils. That's a big problem. Okay, a further issue, it's a different issue, but quite an important one, has to do with technology transfer. So why is this a concern at all? Well, it turns out that a lot of the most innovative work in terms of agricultural technology was originally done in early stages in relatively temperate areas. In Europe, in central and northern China, in parts of North India, in North America, etc. Those are actually very different climates than tropical Africa. So a lot of the crop varieties that really emerged over generations, our current crop varieties were due to generation after generation of interbreeding of different crops, selective planting of certain crop varieties, etc., to come up with pretty good varieties of wheat and maize and rice and other crops. A lot of those crops don't do very well in very hot tropical conditions in Africa. So there was no sort of obvious and easy technology transfer of a lot of the accumulated technological advance agriculturally because of the fact that tropical Africa is in a different ecological zone. So this is another kind of way in which tropical geography is an impediment. Sorry. This is not to say that there hasn't been a lot of advance recently in tropical agriculture. There have been over the past few decades. In Brazil, there's been tremendous progress in promoting agricultural productivity in tropical and subtropical areas. There's been a lot of advance in Southeast Asia in promoting more efficient rice harvesting, rice agriculture there. But only some of those techniques easily translate over into African agriculture. Okay. Another concern, and this ties into health, which we're going to talk about more in a second, is the same sorts of tropical diseases that affect people, and we're going to talk about a lot in the next couple of weeks, also affect livestock. So in some cases, it's literally the same diseases. Cattle get malaria, just like people get malaria. Cattle get trypanosomiasis. This is called sleeping sickness. So do people. In fact, trypanosomiasis is a bigger deal for livestock. Historically, in sub-Saharan Africa, the spread of cattle was limited by where trypanosomiasis was widespread. So trypanosomiasis is spread through a particular type of fly called the tsetse fly. And in the areas where there was a tsetse fly, there were very few cattle, because cattle do not do well, they do not grow well, they do not produce much milk in those areas. So the disease burden affected African agriculture. Okay, so here we have a listing of a bunch, 3 or 4 different factors. What I'd like to do is go to a clicker question, if you guys can go there. Let me just start the poll. And just get a sense. We spoke last time for maybe 15 minutes. Now we spoke another maybe 15 minutes about these agricultural issues in Africa, about some more than others. Based on the reading and Blumensax that you've done, based on the discussion in class, I want you just to think for a second, which of these do you think is really the key issue? It is a fact that agricultural productivity is lower in Africa. Which of these reasons do you think is the key reason? Why? you can talk to your neighbor again during the clicker things if you want to compare notes. Okay, so let's see what the answers are. We actually have a pretty good spread. Some people focused on the low levels of average rainfall. A lot of people on the variable rainfall, which I think observers of African agriculture really do think is essential. Soil fertility is very important. If you don't have fertile soil, it's hard to grow a lot. And then the technology transfer issue is obviously important. There's been a lot of discussion in recent years, really over the last 5 or 6 years, about carrying out what's called a green revolution for Africa. So in Asia in the 60s and 70s, in India and the Philippines, et cetera, there was a tremendous amount of investment in new agricultural technologies, new crop varieties, new seeds, new approaches to boost farm yields. And in the 70s and 80s, as those crops diffused in South Asia and Southeast Asia, there were big increases in yields. So that's called the green revolution that you guys have heard about. But there's never been the equivalent green revolution in Africa. So there are NGOs and nonprofits and government efforts and UN efforts all aimed around trying to catalyze technological change in Africa. So it's a huge area of interest right now. Okay. Which one do I think? I think there's something to all of them. I think the variability of rainfall affects people's decision-making so profoundly. It also has, I think, cultural consequences. When you really feel like rainfall variability from year to year could literally lead your family to starve, I think it leads to fatalism. I think it has, beyond the economic consequences, I think it has profound cultural and social consequences. So I think it's pretty important. I think it's pretty important. Okay. Let me try to go to the display view here. Hold on. Okay. Did it work? No, why? I thought this time it was going to work. Why does it do this to me? Okay, I won't see the next slide. It's fine. Okay, great. Okay, let's turn to health. So this is Goldman Sachs' second factor, and they start off with a stylized fact. Health outcomes are also a lot worse in sub-Saharan Africa. Life expectancy is worse. And actually, life expectancy was worse even before the HIV/AIDS epidemic. So even if we look at life expectancy, say in 1980, just when the HIV/AIDS epidemic was starting, life expectancy was already lower in Africa than in other regions. Now, with the spread of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, it got a lot worse. Life expectancy fell very rapidly in certain countries, although now it's stabilizing or increasing again. So we can't just focus on AIDS. There's something deeper going on. And this gets back to the issue I just raised about the importance of tropical diseases. Now, some of these affected livestock too. But they're incredibly important for people. So yellow fever, which is a mosquito-borne disease. I already mentioned sleeping sickness or trypanosomiasis. Schistosomiasis, also called bilharzia, which is waterborne, where the intermediate host is a snail in the water. And basically, if you bathe in water that's infected with schistosomes, they kind of penetrate through your skin, get kind of itchy, they're very small, and then they make their way through your body to your intestines, and they have all kinds of nutritional consequences for you. There's other forms of intestinal worms that are very widespread as well. So there's just like this terrible long list of tropical diseases that, yes, they exist elsewhere, but they're much more widespread in sub-Saharan Africa. And Goldman Sachs make the case that part of the reason why is Africa's tropical geography. The very high temperatures, and as well as rainfall patterns in some cases. But the most important disease, and we'll get to HIV/AIDS separately later, but of these tropical diseases, the most important one is malaria. So malaria kills hundreds of thousands of Africans every year. Thankfully, those numbers have been falling over the last decade. About a decade ago, it was closer to 1 million a year. So the numbers have actually fallen pretty quickly, but still, they're incredibly high. Anybody who's traveled to tropical regions where there is malaria is sort of familiar with the risk of malaria. If you live in a malarial region, over time you build up some partial immunity. So you're not as affected by getting bitten by the mosquito that has the parasite. Whereas if you, say, grew up here where there's no malaria and you're bitten, you're very much prone to getting sick. So there is some partial immunity that develops, but there are two population groups that don't benefit from that immunity. The first are infants and young children who, A, haven't had time to build up the immunity yet, and B, who tend to have weaker immune systems. So children under age 5, that's the population where the majority of malaria deaths are concentrated. So the youngest and most vulnerable. The other population that's vulnerable to malaria are pregnant women. During pregnancy, the immune system changes, and women become more susceptible to certain types of infections. Now, part of that is so the body won't reject a fetus. So the immune system changes, and pregnant women, all of a sudden, who had partial immunity, become prone to malaria infection again. And that is actually very important because the WHO and other health experts actually say a large share of underweight children, so children who didn't grow well and are born very small and underweight and basically undernourished, a large share of that is due to their mom having malaria during pregnancy. So there could be consequences for the next generation of these pregnant women having malaria. So when historians and demographers look back through time, they actually think malaria played a really critical role in many different aspects of African history and development. So in the 1800s, we talked about Africa's share of the world population is growing. Well, in the 1870s, the estimate is sub-Saharan Africa had a very small share of global population. Remember, by 2060, it's going to be 25%. And a big reason why is tropical disease. The tropical disease burden was so high that life expectancy was short. There was so much mortality. Of course, that high mortality also affected Africa's interactions with the rest of the world because it became very difficult for traders or also foreign armies to go and invade and take over sub-Saharan Africa until after about the 1870s and 1880s when there were actually